G'day everyone, my name's Mark Gjerek. I'm the founder of a company called Movement. We're a team of consultants in Australia and we're on a mission to decarbonise transport through cleaner technology and alternative fuels. I'm going to get to the slides in a minute, but I'm going to start with what I think is a bit of an absurd problem. Picture yourself as a fleet manager or even a small business owner. You've run a fleet of 5 trucks. Comes time to replace 2 of them. You know exactly what you want in terms of specification, so things like payload, what driver license class is required, things like type of transmission, even down to tyres or your driver's preference for a particular type of seat or audio unit. And so you go shopping around to 3 local dealers and start comparing these vehicles on everything from warranty right down to price. Always price, down to the dollar level. We know fleets compare that. And the absurd problem is that you start talking to the dealers and none of them can tell you how much fuel these vehicles will use in comparison to each other. You can't compare them on that basis. And that's absurd because the fuel cost is probably a quarter of your operating expenses. It's the truck is your most expensive asset, and you're almost going into this investment decision blind. And so that was the starting point for us at Movement to start to develop something like a truck rating scheme that allows comparison between vehicles. I'm going to walk you through 4 areas related to that rating scheme. One is the market context, the Australian market context. Context is always important, of course. And secondly, then, why a rating tool is the right thing to fix some of these problems, how a rating tool like that might work, and then certainly the last bit, which is probably the most important or interesting thing, is what we learned from running a pilot scheme of that in Australia. So let's learn about the Australian market. I won't read through all of this, but the Australian market is not very conducive to the adoption of cleaner technologies or alternative fuels or zero emission trucks. There aren't that many price signals. There's not a lot of carrots and not a lot of sticks is probably the best way to describe it. There are certainly no forcing policies to retire vehicles early or to shift to cleaner technologies, and very few incentives. We have had some incentive and grant programs, fairly limited, and the end result of that is that both the awareness of technologies and the availability of technologies and the confidence in those technologies is relatively low in this market. And that has some quite disastrous results. One of those is that the adoption of those cleaner technologies and alternative fuels in Australia for a long time has been declining. So this blue line here against this left axis is new truck sales in Australia. Pretty healthy market. We've been increasing over and above 30,000 up to about 40,000 trucks a year. But then in the opposite direction, we've had the adoption of cleaner technology. So that's everything from fuels to hybrids, etc. Against this axis here, you can see it's been in decline for over a decade, which is the opposite to what you want to see. One result of that is that emissions are continuing to climb for trucks. So our emissions in Australia are baselined against a 2005 figure. That's this zero line here, and you can see in the orange and the yellow that rigid and articulated truck emissions are increasing, have been, and will continue to well into 2030 and beyond. Even if we did increase the uptake of those zero emission and cleaner technologies, that would take a long time to work its way through the fleet. You can see here, this is a graph of truck age for different countries. Australia is at just under 15 years, average age of trucks, much higher than a lot of countries that some of you would come from. And there certainly aren't that many developed countries that have a higher truck age than us or our neighbours in New Zealand. And so what that means is that it takes more than 30 years for new technologies to work their way through the market. And a quarter of the trucks on the road in the state that I live in Queensland, are more than 23 years old. So they have a much lower level of emissions controls. And so, what we know is that we need different and effective actions and tools that are going to reduce emissions from trucks, not just new trucks, but trucks of all ages. And so one of those tools that we could use is a rating tool or a rating scheme. Why is that the right tool, particularly for a market like Australia? Well, firstly, it's simple, and it actually turns what is quite a complex problem, which is energy analysis, into a visual comparison tool. We know that that works in many other sectors, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. The second reason is it does tackle some major barriers, or what we might call market failures. It allows comparison of performance of different vehicles or the features of different vehicles compared with fuel efficiency standards, which basically set the low tide mark. Ratings differentiate performance so that you can recognise higher achievers. It also informs and educates the users of the scheme, and it's based on factors that fleets can actually influence rather than regulators or the OEMs, for example. And really importantly is this element here, where it actually links several parts of the supply chain, not just supply chain players, but things like policy, incentives, and even procurement programs. And so I mentioned that other sectors use ratings. We've got a whole host of them here in Australia. We have a 6-star rating for buildings. The review of that scheme said it was very effective at reducing emissions and electricity use. We have appliance ratings related to energy and energy efficiency, as many countries do. The review of that scheme said it was very effective. We have it for water appliances as well. And look, we have it for food. If you stayed in a hotel for the conference that you're attending, you probably used the equivalent of a rating as well. So very effective at changing people's behaviour and informing consumers. But what we hear all the time is that trucks are different and more complex, and you couldn't develop one for trucks. And so we tried to. As I said, what we heard from industry was that trucks are too complex. They come in too many shapes and sizes. They do all kinds of different work in terms of duty cycles and applications. And the driver makes more difference than the specification of the truck. And here in Australia, there aren't enough technologies available. Again, this is what we heard, to make them efficient. And so we took that as a bit of a challenge. We also heard that if you're going to do such a scheme, then it should probably do more than just one thing. For example, more than just efficiency. And so, cutting a long story very, very short, we proceeded to develop a scheme that effectively scores features of a truck for their effect on improving efficiency and or reducing emissions. And so we had a range of categories in a scoring table, and things like engine specification. You might be surprised to hear we don't have Euro 6 here in Australia yet. It's coming. Alternative fuels or zero emission drivetrain technologies all scored points towards the rating. Things like aerodynamic parts and components that reduce drag and even low rolling resistance tyres. There are a whole range of categories. I won't go into the detail too much. There is a fair bit of complexity in that, and we've got a patent application pending on that as well. But at the end of the day, what we did was score those features in 3 categories, as you can see on the right-hand side there. Something related to the pollution score, also an efficiency score, fuel efficiency or energy efficiency, and the inclusion of smart systems that enable those kind of improvements. And all of those contribute to a star rating score. We then ran a pilot of that scheme or that concept, and we engaged with industry in order to do that, and received some funding from government as well, very generously from the states and also from the federal government here. And we developed as I said, a pilot to run a trial of that rating. There were 3 stakeholder groups primarily this is the most important one in terms of the field test group. That was the participants in the actual trial itself. Those participants involved some fleet and also some dealerships and their head offices in terms of the OEM parent companies. And you can see those there. We had some fleets who dropped out because of COVID, but also we actually scored vehicles from a number of other brands who weren't participating based on their online data and specifications, as well as trucks in the field. And so we ended up scoring about 54 trucks. And these, when I say real trucks, I mean 29 of those were in person at the dealership on the forecourt. 25 of them were based on their online specification, and those, all of those span two groups or two applications: urban distribution trucks less than 10 tonnes and prime movers used in long haul. And if you're familiar with the Australian market, that's single trailer trucks as well as what we call B doubles, so two trailers. And so what did we find in terms of the results? Well, I'll do the two applications separately. So this is the light rigid urban delivery vehicle. What you can see there, and I won't go into the points, I'll just look at the star ratings. You can see that we've scored the OEMs down here in different groupings: OEM 1, 2, 3, and then some what I'm calling hypothetical trucks, not because they don't exist, but these were truck specifications that were online or that we assumed could operate with alternative fuels, for example. And what you see in the results is that some OEMs do better than others, obviously. You know, these guys over here were relatively low scored, and these were all relatively high based on the features that were fitted to those trucks that improve efficiency. And one of the things we were testing was the spread of scores from, you know, down low, and there were definitely some trucks that scored quite low, all the way up to trucks, real trucks that scored up to 6 stars. And you can see there's, you know, there's scores all the way through that range. For this category in particular, I guess a really important aspect is that some of these trucks are what we call pre-built, so they come fitted, you know, cab chassis plus body as a unit from the dealer, as opposed to getting a cab chassis from the OEM and then sending it out to a bodybuilder to get it built. It can come pre-built, but a lot of those scored quite low. It was possible to get up to about 3.5 stars with an optimized diesel truck. A hybrid truck could get you up to 5 stars, and our battery electric truck was rated at up to 6 stars. Didn't automatically get 6 stars. It still needed to have some optimization. Really important point is that we also rated some second-hand trucks or used trucks, which can be rated on the same scheme based on the scoring criteria that we had, which is really important for reducing emissions through you know, across the entire truck park. If we look at the second application, then this is a long haul, so basically scoring the prime mover. We didn't do trailers, but that could be done. Same concept, you know, this was the spread of scores across different OEMs that we looked at. And again, you can see that there were trucks that would have scored anywhere between 1 and 6 stars based on the features fitted. And again, some OEMs do better than others. Again, in this category, it was possible to get up to 4 stars with an optimized diesel truck. We have alternative fuels and technologies at the time that we did this. So this is a year and a half, 2 years ago now. But you could reach 4.5 stars using alternative fuels. A zero emission truck could get up to 6 stars, which is the maximum score. And again, very relevant to application to used trucks as well. Perhaps the most important thing in terms of running a pilot of such a scheme is, did we actually achieve what we intended to in the pilot? And look, the answer is overwhelmingly yes. The pilot that we ran showed that such a scheme could be effective. We would have loved to have scored, you know, several hundred trucks, but I think we had a pretty wide sample within those two applications. And the other objectives of the pilot were all met in terms of understanding the features that are available by different OEM or by different brand, understanding the sales process. Where could this such a scheme or the scoring take place within the sales and handover process. We got a pretty good understanding of that, particularly working with dealers. Very importantly, would this be likely to influence buyer behaviour? And that was certainly a resounding yes from the dealer salespeople that we spoke to. They were probably a bit sceptical to start with, but decided that actually this could be quite effective. And then, of course, we tested the scores and the stars across all the different technology categories that we have available in the market and that were coming at the time. And look, I think most importantly, the fact that you could use the same scoring criteria for used trucks as well, second-hand trucks, makes that kind of a concept very effective at reducing emissions across the park, not just waiting for new truck sales. So I'll pause there. I'm roughly on time and happy to take any questions or for people to reach out separately